So welcome back to Third Age Reforged into another battle replay, and as promised this one is going to be the Grey Havens because I didn't yet disable the particle effects that will allow me to do the Kyrith Ungol battle without hideous lag in the late stages. But the Grey Havens I did actually have two on the back burner, one of which was a winter battle, but that was another 2v4 from 0, so I figured that I'd spread those out a little bit and give a little bit more variety. So this is going to be a 3v4 with obviously the 3 on the defence, and we'll go through the attacking armies first of all so we can go through the defences a little bit later. So down here in the south we have the Steward of Dale, who's going to be playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, or the Goblins of the Misty Mountains really. And, you know, numbers are obviously going to be the Goblins' best friends in most siege battles because they can bring an awful lot of numbers to the field and they can punch through lines with quite a few of their sort of more high-power tools as well. The Black Orcs of the Mountains, however, are probably the one section of their front line which does have a decent bit of skill to them, obviously two-handed swordsmen. They will still really struggle against elven, human and dwarven units of a sort of similar type. But nonetheless they can still hold their own and they can certainly add a little bit more danger to the front line than the heavy goblins will. We also have some Goblin Infantry. Obviously the first unit of these guys are going to be free, so you may as well bring one. You know, obviously if you have one empty slot in your army for free, you may as well bring them along and they can be used as fodder to push up the ram, which they are going to be doing in this battle. I've got another unit of Black Orcs here, both of which are on the ladders, so it looks as though he's going to be fairly serious about trying to take the walls. He is also not going to be dividing his force between both of the southern gates and is instead going to be trying to meet up with his allies on this one, which, you know, it does allow the defenders to concentrate their forces, but it also does give the attackers a lot more potency in an area of the map. Got some Bolgs champions over here, not the General's Bodyguard actually, but it will give them a bit of movement in the town if they can break through the defensive lines, and it will also help zone out any defensive cavalry that they may have, because obviously the Bolgs champion is incredibly strong in melee against other cavalry units. Naturally, if it's a siege battle and they're on the attack, the Misty Mountains will not be without their cave trolls because they're so good at just breaking through the lines very, very quickly and going after the squishier stuff in behind. But they themselves are pretty squishy for trolls. They will fall away faster than stuff like Olag High and Trolls of the White Hand. The Heavy Goblin Spears as well, which actually are noticeably better than the other Heavy Goblin units at the moment. They will be brought more into line in 0.97 with the other Heavy Goblins, so they will be on a similar sort of tier as the Heavy Goblin Infantry and Halberds, whereas at the moment they're a little bit higher up. But they will still be maintaining their AP, so really the main reason why you want to bring them is still going to be an effect of 0.97, and it offers them a very cheap and effective way of not only holding a line, but also dishing out a little bit of damage to armoured troops as well. And a couple of units of Heavy Goblin crossbows. Again, crossbows are so effective if they get into the right position and start shooting. And in a siege battle like this, if you're on the attack, if you can get your crossbows into a good position, you know, that can be sort of the difference between victory and defeat, particularly where the Orcs are concerned, because their attacks can start to fall apart if you don't sort of support it with the right units, and the Heavy Goblin crossbows offers a lot of punch at range. Another unit of Cave Trolls back there, and finally Azog, who often is in this unit in siege battles it seems, the Goblin King's Bodyguard, which there's nothing too special about them when you compare them to other sort of multiple hit point bodyguard units, but you know, they are still very difficult to wear down, and obviously, you know, way back when they used to have exactly the same model as the Heavy Goblin Infantry, so it's good that they now have their sort of rusty red aesthetic going on. The second army is going to be Vintage V, who is going to be playing as Isengard. He's got some Uruk-hai infantry with the armour upgrade, which makes them a very, very effective line infantry unit. We'll see if they have the damage necessary to break through the defenders. We also have a couple of units of Uruk-hai archers just to apply some range pressure, which is good. I'm always a big supporter of the attackers bringing sort of cheap skirmishers so they can at least return fire on the defenders in their inevitably strong position. Now we move on to the Dunlending Clansmen, who, unlike other sort of lowest tier Orc units, they are not free for the first one, but they are also slightly more useful than the other fodder units, because as Dunlanders they have a heightened anti-cavalry bonus, and as Spear Militia they already had an anti-cavalry bonus, so they can actually be pretty deadly to cavalry, honestly. So I like the pick of these guys, just have them at the front to sort of stop any immediate frontal charges from defensive cavalry. Speaking of which, we also have the Dunlending Berserkers, which they also have an anti-cavalry bonus. All the Dunlanders do. Obviously not quite as much as a spear unit would have, but even so, if cavalry get tied up in the Dunlanders, that's going to be pretty bad for them. And they also offer a bit of AP as well, so good to see a couple of units of them actually, because you don't get to see them an awful lot. Because overall, this unit over here is generally agreed upon to be more cost effective in 0.96, and that is the Uruk-hai Reavers, because there are more of them. And obviously they also do a little bit more damage, I think, overall. A lot of Dunlanders actually on display. Dunland Veterans, which again, it's a similar story here. When you compare them to the Uruk-hai Raiders, there are fewer of them in the unit, and they have slightly lower defensive values overall, but they do also do a little bit more damage and have that anti-cavalry bonus, so it depends really on the situation. I would say that probably the Raiders would have been the more optimal choice in this sort of situation where you want just pure numbers to wear the enemy down, but the added damage can actually be quite handy provided you support the Dunland veterans with something a little bit better so that they don't fall apart. I've also got, of course, some Uruk-hai crossbows and more archers, and then some Uruk-hai infantry, and finally at the back we have a couple of units of warg, so again, will be pretty good as soon as the defensive lines start to fall apart and the open areas of the city become available, or of course to stop any defensive cavalry. And then finally we have Saruman in his bodyguard unit, the guards of war thank multiple HP spears, tough to wear down, not necessarily the best at dealing damage, but they stay alive very, very well. Fairly interesting army actually, fairly well rounded, but not typical for Isengard. And here we can see Angmar, played by Stallion24, who is, this replay is going to be from the perspective of. We've got some orc fellas, obviously cheap orc axes, they're going to be pushing up the towers. We can see the barrow wights in their hidden position, which they look very weird in their hidden position, but obviously in 0.96 the barrow wights are also extremely effective at just being that melee tar pit. That will still be their function in 0.97 as well, although they will be losing basically half of their hit points, but they will also be gaining sort of regular speed. So overall they'll feel a little bit nicer to use, even if they won't be as effective when they finally get to melee. Here we have some orc fellas as well. Some Snaga, which the first unit of course is free, they're going to be pushing up the ram. And then back here we have some Witch Realm pikemen who have got their jet black armour, so they have got the upgrades. Obviously a very nice unit to sort of tie your line together. That's something that Isengard have not brought actually, any of their pikes, which is an interesting one. Trolls of Gundabad, the slightly more offensive trolls. We also have the Witch Realm Inquisitors with the Witch King himself, laying siege to the Grey Havens. Obviously the Witch Realm Inquisitors, once again, I really hope the defenders haven't brought any defensive cavalry, because every army we've seen so far has got ample tools to deal with them, and the Witch Realm Inquisitors obviously fantastic at that. Melee Knights, arguably the best melee Knights. The Haven Guard might have something to say about that, or Haven Knights I should say. The Guardians of Khan Doom, again with the armour upgrade, makes them very, very tough. They're not necessarily the strongest in terms of killing power, but overall the strength that they add to the front line is something which cannot be ignored. The General's Bodyguard unit, you can see here, the Witch King sort of subordinate with the big mace is actually the General here. So we have the Witch Realm Blackguard, and we've seen the Witch Realm Blackguard time and time again just grind out tons and tons of kills in a sustained melee fight. Really one of the strongest sword and board units there are in the game, arguably the strongest actually. Guardians of Khan Doom, as well as some Witch Realm pikemen. Also we see the Blackwatch Legion. Everyone seems to really despise the pushing units, but it is something that the Blackwatch, Angmar will be able to use to their advantage here with the Blackwatch Legion, and they've also got some Trolls of Angmar as well. So overall a little bit more quality to Angmar's focus here. Upgrades on the Guardians of Khan Doom and the Witch Realm pikemen, and then the Trolls, the Cavalry and the higher tier infantry. Not maybe as much as they might need in terms of numbers, but over on this side we also have the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm, which it is almost a good versus evil fight, if not for the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm being on the attack, but I guess they are facing the Elves, so I guess Sauron managed to corrupt them. And then we have obviously the Dwarven Catapult, first piece of artillery we've actually seen, be able to bombard those walls over there. And we also have some Sentries of Khazad-dûm, so obviously a decent pike unit that they can use. Upgraded Warriors of Khazad-dûm with the armour upgrade. Obviously Khazad-dûm is so strong in 0.96 because of the depth of strength in their infantry. Hammers of Gundabad with some AP. We also have the 2nd Legion Axeguard with AP and a little bit higher defense. More 2nd Legion, some Sons of the Fallen, more upgraded Warriors of Khazad-dûm. Mithril Guard out here on the flank pushing a siege tower actually, so AP in there. Legion Bodyguard, which is going to be the General's Bodyguard this time around. We also have some Orc Hunters here at the back as well as more pikes, so yeah, overall the infantry death squad that you would expect from Khazad-dûm. And once again, they are not going to be dividing their attention between both the northern gates, they are going to be focusing on the one closest to their Angmar allies to try and take this section of the map first of all, try and take the eastern section of the city before trying to move to the west and ultimately going after the town centre over there on that island. So, without further ado, let's begin. And I would imagine, based on the amount of frames actually and the amount of armies involved... Actually, wait a minute. My bad, we haven't gone through the defenders yet. I almost fucked that up. We have Erebor, played by Dollar Elf, who's got some Ironfoot halberds. And we have Lyndon, played by Khvorvin 18, who's going to be playing as Lyndon with some Harlan Guard here. The Ironfoot pikes, obviously Lyndon and Erebor put together. Pretty potent defensive force with the armour and the skill that both sides offer. Over here in the north it looks as though Erebor and Lyndon are going to be primarily meeting Khazad-dûm, the other dwarven faction, and Angmar. Ironfoot halberds as well, another strong dwarven defensive line here. Up here on the hill, we've got some Ironfoot crossbows in a good position. We have 2 units of Noldor in guard facing off against Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm obviously well documented as being a very strong faction, so the fact that these very strong units over here have been sent to face them is unsurprising. I would say Linden also, alongside Khazad-dûm, are one of the easiest factions to play in 0.96. You can scarcely go wrong with Linden. Axguard of Erebor and Ironfoot Axfoes also over here to try and help deal with those Khazad-dûm as they advance. The Black Locks also, good choice against Khazad-dûm actually, AP and body piercing. One of the ways that you can certainly cut down on their strength very, very quickly. MITHLOND Marines are over here as well, and then the final defensive army. As we start getting them into them over here, we have Arthedain played by MacThorn. Obviously Arthedain as well. Maybe not quite as quality focused as Erebor and Linden are, but they should be able to hold off the vast numbers of the Orcs, though all of the Orc factions have gone maybe a little bit more quality focused. We do have some defensive cavalry. The Dunedain Mounted Company and the Dunedain Scouts will find it quite difficult, I feel like, if the defenders have, well, the attackers I should say, managed to defend their armies significantly, because they have all the correct tools to deal with a unit of Lancers. Arthedain Pikemen are also over here, and then back here we also have the fully upgraded Arthedain Men-at-Arms, so obviously a little bit tougher to get through. I would still say even when they're fully upgraded it will be a pretty dicey battle between them and the Uruk-hai Infantry, just because the Uruk-hai Infantry have got slightly higher numbers. MITHLOND Swordmasters, as well as some MITHLOND Marines. So Linden taking the responsibility for going after the Misty Mountains, knowing that the Misty Mountains have most of their strength bound up in armor-piercing units, and Linden, of course, have no issues dealing with armor-piercing focused units. Harland Infantry, as well as some MITHLOND Pikemen, some 4 Linden Archers as well, Harland Infantry, MITHLOND Pikemen, all of the standard stuff. And over here we have a few more units from Arthedain, Arthedain Men-at-Arms, Pikemen, Heavendim Archers, although these units will probably be moved because obviously the Misty Mountains are not going to be attacking this area. Arthedain Pikemen, Harland Infantry, as well as some Dunedain Peacekeepers. Obviously the Dunedain Sphere is slightly more skillful. MITHLOND Swordmasters and MITHLOND Swordmasters, and there is a single unit back here in the town centre of Dunedain Rangers. There's probably hidden units all over the place as well. Linden and Arthedain in particular can bring quite a few hidden units to the table. So now we will begin. And as I was saying, based on the amount of time there is, based on the frames and based on the amount of armies there are involved, looks like the attackers are not going to be wasting any time here. So there's not really going to be any sort of elongated skirmish, I would imagine, especially not considering the factions involved. Factions like Angmar and the Misty Mountains can't really afford to get into a skirmish fight with the likes of Arthedain and Linden anyway, unless they have brought a lot of their cheap archers, in which case they can wear them down over time, but even so, that is a risky proposition, shall we say, as the Misty Mountains start to close in. Meanwhile, the cavalry is here, and the Dunedain Mounted Company and the Dunedain Scouts are out and about. We shall see the road that leads off into the east. But you can see already the Dunedain Mounted Company and the Dunedain Scouts are being attacked by some of the Isengard skirmishers. You can see the Uruk-hai Archers already returning fire on the Scouts, and the problem the Scouts have is they are pretty fragile at range. You know, essentially they have very, very low armor values. They can kite, however. They will be able to kite, but it's going to take an awful lot of arrows before they do any significant damage to the Witch-Realm Inquisitors from the front. Multiple HP, good shield values, all of that good stuff. The Wargs, however, will be a much more prime target for the Dunedain Scouts, because while they do have multiple HP, as soon as those HP have been expended, they have next to no armor or defensive values at all, so it'll be fairly easy to kill them off. Dunedain Mounted Company. This will still be a concern for the attackers, but they do have all the correct tools to deal with this. I mean, the Witch-Realm Pikemen are now being focused down, just keeping an eye on when the attackers actually reach the gates, which looks like it's going to be fairly soon. But even so, I feel as though, you know, with all the Wargs, in particular, I think the Bolgs Champions and the Misty Mountains can also be brought over here, and you can essentially corral them to the edge of the map and then finish them off. More so than anything, the Dunedain Scouts, I think, are going to be the more annoying unit for the attackers to have to deal with, because they can just skirmish down from a distance like this, and they are going after a pretty decent target in the Witch-Realm Pikemen as well. And they are pretty quick as well, so even though the Witch-Realm Inquisitors are coming in here, I would imagine that Thorn is going to be able to see this, or will he? Oh, he's not. He's not, and the Witch-Realm Inquisitors are going to get in here, and this is going to be a bad fight for the Dunedain Scouts. Horse archers in general are not really designed to be in melee, with a few exceptions, and the Witch-Realm Inquisitors very much are. So yeah, here you go, the Dunedain Scouts are going to try and get out of there, but that's going to cut down a lot of their unit's strength. You can see now the attack on the walls is also going to begin. And the Warg Riders over here are now sort of chasing off the Dunedain Mounted Company, who I think are going to try and save the Horse Archers by getting into the Witch Realm Inquisitors. But the Witch Realm Inquisitors, they should just turn around and take this engagement, because then they can sandwich the Dunedain Mounted Company between themselves and the Wargs. And as soon as that happens, the Dunedain Mounted Company are going to be absolutely destroyed. I mean, they're going to try and get out of there now after getting a kind of a charge on the Witch Realm Inquisitors. But you can see here that the Arthedain cavalry is not really in an ideal position. All of the correct counters are in place. However, let's see over here, and you can actually see the gates have been opened. The Orc fellas are here. I would actually worry a little bit that Angmar have not got their reinforcements close enough to the gates. If they just send forward their low tier units like they have at the moment, they could be in a little bit of trouble. The Orc fellas are trying to clear a spot on the wall. But the Axe Guard of Erebor are going to be more than sufficient to deal with Orc fellas, even if their AP is not really in full effect. The Axe Guard of Erebor are by far the superior unit to just these basic Orc Axemen. And they will take a couple of losses from the AP on the Orc fellas, but overall, definitely a very lopsided engagement, and there isn't really anything to follow the Orc fellas up. They have created a gap here, but there's no stronger units ready to come in. You can see actually over here. Ooh, the Dunedain Mounted Company coming in here, but the Witch is actually being used to deal with this cavalry. Again, that's not really necessary. The Dunedain Mounted Company came in here, I think, to try and get some kills on the Trolls, but the Pikes were here. They didn't really need to use the Witcher ammunition. And now, the Witchers have revealed themselves, and that is... I didn't even notice them in the army compositions, but now everyone will have noticed them. All of the defenders will know that the Witchers are in play. So let's see how well this goes. Now the Barrow Wights are going forward first, but they are going right into this V formation that Dollar Elf has set up with his dwarves, and this is obviously going to be a very effective phalanx, a combination of pikes and halberds, so a double phalanx, combined I think with some Ironfoot spears in there as well for the mass. So I don't think the Barrow Wights are actually going to be able to close with these pike units. You actually need to disrupt the phalanx, and then once the Barrow Wights are in and amongst the mess you've created after pushing in with mass, that's when they're at their most effective. The Ironfoot axe throwers coming over here as well. Maybe a little bit of a waste of ammunition for on the Orc fellas, because they were never really going to be up to much in melee anyway. The Axe Guard of Erebor have got them up. The Axe Guard of Erebor are actually taking a fairly substantial amount of damage. I can't help but feel as though that's partially friendly fire. Meanwhile, you can see over here as well, actually I think it's about time we turn the speed down with all of the engagements that are happening all at once. Arthedain trying to hold back Isengard, and Isengard have had a little bit more success so far, purely because Arthedain didn't have as much of a comprehensive defense over here as Erebor had up against Angmar. Isengard have sent forward some of their Uruk-hai infantry with the armour upgrade. However, they are going up against Dunedain Peacekeepers, which again are, as I've said numerous times, very elven in the way that they seem to play with their heightened skill values. And the Uruk-hai infantry will need a little bit more support, as they're also engaging this unit of Arthedain pikemen over here. You can see that the Dunlending Berserkers and the Dunlending Clansmen are coming forward in a large blob as well. Interestingly enough, the Evendim archers are trying to go shoot into this Isengard blob, but their inaccuracy is actually causing a lot of friendly fire into the back of their own pike unit. And the pikes need to stay in formation here, otherwise the Dunlenders are going to pour forwards. That artillery up on the hill as well, the Trebuchet from Arthedain, trying to get a nice hit, and it does get a nice hit. Narrow miss there, but this is risky. I mean, the danger of friendly fire here is real. And if Arthedain gets a decent amount of friendly fire, that's going to be all the invitation that Isengard need to pour forward with full strength to crush this formation. Here, actually, we see a very even fight between the upgraded Uruk-hai infantry and the upgraded Arthedain men-at-arms, and I think it's going to come down to numbers here. Uruk-hai infantry actually very even in terms of numbers. The Arthedain units have got the slightly better engagement. We'll see. I mean, neither of those two units are going to look too healthy after coming out of that fight if there are no outside factors to consider. We can see another unit of Arthedain pikemen getting ready perhaps to try and reinforce. Meanwhile, you can see down here that now the Misty Mountains are starting to get into position and are going to lay siege to this southern gate that Linden are watching over, and the Black Uruks of the Mountains are going to get up onto the walls, although I'm not sure actually that the Black Uruks of the Mountains will really enjoy going up against Harland's infantry when they're going up in single file formation like this. I have a feeling as soon as they drop onto the walls, the Harlanden units are just going to be able to kill them off relatively easily, although I guess it's better than Snaga, although it looks like the Snaga trying to use their javelins. These Mithlond pikemen are actually not really in the ideal position. They're trying now to get into a position where they can engage. The Snaga obviously are not going to be a match for the Linden units at all. The Trolls coming in, the Snaga already breaking. The Javelins certainly not helping matters there. The Goblin Infantry are over there. Hang on a minute. Snaga? Snaga Stalkers? No, Snaga Skirmishers that was. So Javelins wasted. Heavy Goblin Spears are moving forward now. Actually, these Trolls, this could be a very key part of how the Misty Mountain engagement goes. There you can see the Khazad-dûm are also getting ready to attack the northern gate. But if the Cave Trolls are not able to get through this line and start engaging these Skirmishers, the Misty Mountain Assault could be in a little bit of trouble. But having said that, Linden are actually a little bit thin on the ground here, and you can see that the Black Uruks are actually getting up onto the wall. They will be able to engage, and there are some Mountain Orc Berserkers also following them up. But the AP from the Mountain Orc Berserkers is not really going to be terribly useful against Linden, of course. I don't know, this is a lot of Goblins that are pouring forward, and I don't think Linden gave the Misty Mountains the respect they deserve, because they haven't got a defence over here which is going to be able to hold this back for all that long. The Cave Trolls are going to be able to do a significant amount of damage to the Pikemen. The Cave Trolls will fizzle out relatively quickly. The Javelins are coming in here as well, but that will inflict some friendly fire. Oh, excuse me. My voice is on the way out again, unfortunately. The Heavy Goblin Spears are over here taking some damage, but there's a lot of Goblins, and if they can sort of force path their way around this defence, could be a bit of trouble for Linden. The reinforcements are on the way from the other southern gate. You can see the Band of Brass Archers and Arthedain Men-at-Arms getting ready to get into position. Meanwhile, Arthedain's front line has held resolutely. The Pikes able to deal with these relatively lightly armoured Dunlanders and Uruk-hai Reavers. So I think it's time for Isengard to try and utilise their skirmishers a little bit more wisely. You can see here that Isengard have got the perfect opportunity to get up onto the walls with their skirmishers and start shooting down into this Arthedain defensive line. That would be all that would be required to win this fight for Isengard, I think, because there's not really anything that Arthedain could do to answer that other than try and skirmish them down with their own archers, which they could do, but that's not really a fight that Arthedain wants to be taking, really. And I'm actually very surprised that Isengard have not got their archers up on the walls and are instead shooting over the wall and sort of making their shots very inaccurate and not as damaging. Meanwhile, the Angmar forces, you can see the Barrow-wights making absolutely no progress against this resolute Dwarven V formation. You can see now that Snaga Stalkers are coming in. But the Erebor front line holding firm, and Angmar not being aggressive enough, I have to say. Now the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm are starting to come forward, engaging this unit of Ironfoot Warriors which is up on the wall, which these Guardians of Kharn-Dûm seem to be stuck actually. They don't seem to be attacking any further in. Yeah, maybe a little bit too passive for me this from Angmar. If you're Angmar, you have the strength to be super aggressive and reap the rewards from that. But as it is, the slower this engagement goes, the more it's going to suit Erebor, because they're going to have these skirmishes like these Ironfoot Axe Throwers getting into nice positions to just throw their payloads into these Angmar blobs. You can see there that the animations for the Barrow-wights going absolutely crazy. Oh my word, that's actually a very interesting glitch, because the Barrow-wights are actually able to get in behind the Dwarven defensive line, but one by one that isn't going to be a problem for how many dwarves that there are. They're trying to force path their way through, which is paying dividends. This should have been what Angmar did from the beginning, I think. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening over on this end of things, and we have an engagement up on the walls, or had an engagement up on the walls. The Ironfoot Warriors facing off against Warriors of Khazad-dûm, which I can only assume single file lined up those ladders and were then destroyed. Again, I feel as though Khazad-dûm being a little bit passive. They need to get in there, need to get stuck in. If you outnumber the defenders and you have factions like Khazad-dûm and Angmar at your disposal, brute force is your best friend against defenders, especially ones who maybe lack a little bit of mass like Linden. We shall see how that southern engagement is going in a minute, but you can see here the Axe Guard of Erebor going up against the 2nd Legion Axe Guard, so very much almost a mirror match here between Erebor and Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm renowned as being slightly the stronger in terms of their infantry force, but Erebor have the advantage of the defensive position on the walls. Another V formation over here. But it does look as though Khazad-dûm are going to be coming forward in slightly more numbers than Angmar initially did, so the Warriors of Khazad-dûm are going to lead the way, and I would imagine then that the Khazad-dûm Pikes would also get themselves into position, which indeed they are. So that's good to see. However, there are more Ironfoot Axe Throwers over here. Erebor doing a good job so far of keeping their strong defensive positions intact. Meanwhile, you can see here that a bit of a mess has broken out, although Linden have managed to stabilise this front line a little bit. You know, they were actually in a little bit of peril, I think. But meanwhile, this unit of Howland Infantry up on the wall, the combination of Mountain Orc Berserkers and Black Uruks of the mountains, actually sufficient to defeat that unit. although the support from those skirmishers up on the hill over there, and you can see now that a sort of secondary position has been formed. A lot of Linden units, a lot of Arthedain units getting ready just in case the Misty Mountains do break through here. Thorn also sending over some Dunedain Peacekeepers to help hold the line. So yeah, I feel as though the opportunity has kind of gone for the Misty Mountains. They had the chance there, I think, to really cause some damage quite quickly. But having said that, they did at least attack forward in numbers, which did cause Linden a little bit of panic. But now, obviously, the flip side of that is they've taken a lot of damage. I mean, this has cost the Misty Mountains quite dearly. The Heavy Goblin Spears are trying to push through, but this part of the line is too thick. And all they're going to do is succeed in getting themselves killed. Mithlond Marines in melee now as well. You can see here that the Mountain Orc Berserkers, I think, are going to try and make to get through this gap. The Spears still just trying to push their way through, but more reinforcements are on the way. Another unit of pikes to help plug the gap. And yeah, the Misty Mountains are in a little bit of trouble here because they're going to be taking some significant losses as this goes on. The Bogs Champions maybe have a chance to get in here. Ooh, the Trebuchet. Snaga Skirmishers routing off. Not a huge amount in reserve for the Misty Mountains, so this makes this engagement that Isengard are undertaking even more important because they need to make something happen over here, and they're actually being forced back. The Dunlending Veterans, a single unit of Dunlending Veterans is not the answer for dismounted Knights of Illuminas. And they've actually taken some damage, the dismounted Knights of Illumina, so they must have been in melee ever since we left this engagement last. And finally we have some Uruk-hai archers getting up on the walls, but I can't help but notice they have their scimitars out, which probably means they're out of ammunition. And Uruk-hai archers in melee are not the answer to this either. And again, a lot of these arrows just getting buried into the walls, which not terribly useful. Uruk-hai crossbows are over there, more infantry, the guards of Orthanc, wargs, veterans all over the place. Pretty disorganised thus far. And Arthedain will be... the Uruk-hai archers do have ammunition, so he has finally got up onto the walls. He's now doing damage, but it is kind of to the wrong unit. The Abendim archers probably the least threatening of all the Arthedain units. Should probably be going after pikes instead. Meanwhile, we can see the Guardians of Khandu now a little bit more aggression here from Angmar. See the trolls coming forward, trying to crack through this very solid dwarven front line, and this is an engagement which is suddenly going to look pretty dicey for the dwarves. The dwarves of Erebor are not going to enjoy going up against a force this strong. And that, I recognise that sound as being crossbow bolts, and indeed it is. Also rangers, so you can see that these Hobbit Slingers also in here as well, trying to throw their pebbles, bring down the mighty trolls. We've seen the Hobbit Slingers be effective recently, so they're certainly not a punchline. There's also Blackwatch Legion here, but this is pretty much the entirety of Angmar's strength, so they're going to get through here, but what will they actually have left when all is said and done? Barrow Whites have also taken some substantial losses, so they're not going to quite be the tour de force in the late game that perhaps we are used to. These Ironfoot Warriors are also going to get down off the walls and try and shore this defence up, but the Trolls have finally broken the back of this dwarven defence, I think. Now it's just a case of the skirmishers in behind trying to do as much damage as they can. The Highborns of Erebor being committed, so Dollar Elf not quite ready to give up on this defence just yet. And that may be because the defenders are actually fairly committed to holding all of the outer choke points, which I actually agree with, because, you know, other than over here, where it does look as though Khazad-dûm have made a few inroads, you can see the Dunedain Troll Slayers getting into position with their AP. The Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin are going to be far too strong for a unit of strung out pikes. But yeah, here you can see the strength of Khazad-dûm when they come forward in force. Erebor had a relatively similar defence setup over here as they did against Angmar. But when Khazad-dûm came forward, they did so in numbers. And this is the reward that you get from that sort of thing. You can't afford to... Like Angmar did, he sent forward his Barrow Whites all on their lonesome and waited for too long to reinforce them, really. You can't expect Barrow Whites to be miracle workers against a defence that strong. You need to send forward more than that. And that is what Khazad-dûm have done. Sending forward a lot of units. They have punched through, but again, this has cost them a little bit. Because now they're in a position where their army is fairly strung out, and they're being shot by Blacklock Engineers. There were Troll Slayers over here just a moment ago. The Dragon Slayers are also getting into position, which... The Dragon Slayers versus the Mithril Guard, that is a clash of the Titans. Second Legion also slowly but surely carving their way through these armoured Erebor defenders. But the Blacklock Engineers have got a very, very nice shot through here. They need to be careful though, they could get some friendly fire on their Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin. They can see the Black Box trying to provide the support just to keep this Erebor defense alive. Credit to Dollarel for trying to keep these defenders in check. You can see there the Witchers laying waste to that unit of Troll Slayers. Fiery Doom, but not killing off the entire unit. And the Witchers, really, I can't help but feel as though the Witchers are really best saved for a nice blob, because if you can get a Witcher shot off into a hefty blob of defenders, that could win you the game all on its own. Now the Witcher on Blackguard are forward, the Barrow Wights are still forward, the Highborns of Erebor are good, but they're not going to be able to defeat this Angmar advance now. Now we can see aggression being meted out, the Trolls causing havoc in the skirmish lines. So more success for the attackers being had in the north than in the south, because the mini-map has not moved at all really. In fact, Isengard are being forced ever further backwards. I mean, there are Dunlanding veterans now up on the walls still, but I can't help but feel as though that isn't really going to come to much. You can see here in this choke point, the dismounted Knights of Saruman are still standing firm with the support of their pikes. Uruk-hai infantry being backed up by Uruk-hai archers that have expended all their ammunition, but again, I can't help but feel as though Isengard is running out of ideas here. It was an unorthodox army from them to bring so many Dunlanders, which I'm actually in favour of, and it could have been more effective than it was. But overall, I feel as though not getting those archers up onto the walls that Arthedain essentially just let Isengard have was a pretty large mistake. Those archers should have been raining death down on Arthedain's defence, and Thorn should have been punished for letting Isengard have the walls. Meanwhile, over here, the Misty Mountains, in their attempt to be very aggressive, they have been punished fairly dearly for that, because the Misty Mountains, I think, are going to be the first army to fall. They had the opportunity, but again, I feel as though this isn't entirely down to the Misty Mountains. I feel as though if you're going to be this aggressive, you need the entirety of your team to be this aggressive so that they can't focus you down, because here, Lindum were able to focus so much of their strength on the Misty Mountain. What on earth was that?
Only half the enemy force remains.
Trebuchet trying to shoot into Angmar as they penetrate further into the settlement. Heavy Goblin Crossmen also trying to do as much damage to these Linden forces down here as they can, and they are getting a lot of damage done to the Mithlond Swordmasters, allowing the Snaga potentially to overcome the Mithlond Swordmasters in melee. Blackback Berserkers, which were hidden at the start, again though Linden, they're going to be able to withstand a savage unit on the attack like the Blackbacks better than most. The Goblin King's Bodyguard are now in here, which means the General going to be putting himself in harm's way, but the Linden Archer line and Javelin line so strong, and this unit of crossbows getting dumpstered in a skirmish fight by not only that, but also Ebendim archers offering their support. The Trebuchet getting his position to you can see there that the Trebuchet just shooting way up into the air, trying to get some hits on Khazad-dûm. It's unlikely they'll actually be able to score any decisive hits, but still. The Rangers and the Bandabrass archers trying to get away from this one troll, and the Arthedain men-at-arms are going to try and bring him down, which they should be able to. It's only a single troll. They become much less scary when they're only single units. The Witchers biding their time. It could still be a very key factor in this battle. There goes the Erebor General. Erebor have paid for trying to hold these two skirmish points, or two choke points, not skirmish points. And these Guardians of Kharn slowly munching their way through the Arthedain pikes. You can see now the Witch-Armed Inquisitors are in the settlement, and this is the problem when you sort of defend the outer defences almost exclusively, really. When the enemy cavalry is able to get into the settlement, they're going to be able to recharge your positions. And you can see here that Khazad-dûm ultimately victorious as well up in the north. So I feel as though Angmar and Khazad-dûm are going to be... they're going to have to put the team on their back here. In particular Khazad-dûm, because they still have a pretty... well, they have some fairly decent units left alive. Again, it's not exactly a horde that they have, but their forces are still of good quality. They still have the Mithril Guard, they still have the Sons of the Fallen, they still have some hammers. There are some Ironfoot Crossmen right here. And they are ultimately going to be able to chase Erebor all the way back to the town centre if they so choose, with the support of this cavalry as well. Now is going to be the test of whether the defenders can reorganise, because they've had a pretty comfortable existence up to this point. On those outer choke points, particularly against Isengard and the Misty Mountains in the south, everything was going their way, but now Erebor, who essentially had to defend these two choke points against probably the strongest of the two attacking forces. Angmar and Khazad-dûm very well renowned for being very good when they're aggressive. I'm actually quite surprised that Erebor were given the responsibility of taking on those two. I think it would have been perhaps more prudent if Erebor had been given the responsibility of taking on maybe Isengard and Angmar, and then maybe Linden going after Khazad-dûm. But hindsight is 2020. Meanwhile, the Blacklock Engineers are a unit that, you know, a very important target for Angmar to deal with because they're so deadly. Meanwhile, what can Isengard make happen here in the south? They still have their Uruk-hai crossbows, but this defense is going nowhere fast. Oh. You can see that Knights of Numinous and the Dunedain Peacekeepers still on the front line. They are slowly but surely being worn down, but no progress is being made by Isengard. But I would still give the advantage to the attackers with how the northern engagements have turned so quickly. I feel as though the attackers are in a pretty good place, and obviously they did start off with an army advantage, which is always very important. Meanwhile, Harlan Guard's still going after the crossbows, as depleted as they are. Another unit of crossbows over here. MITHLOND Swordmasters trying to kill off as many as they can, but it's really only the crossbows and the General's Bodyguard unit at this point that the Misty Mountains have available to them. Which is all well and good. Linden will be victorious down here, but the defenders need to... They need to look around the battlefield here. They need to have good map awareness, because if they don't, they're going to be punished. Linden can't afford to just be happy with his work against the Misty Mountains. They need to get ready to meet the advance of Khazad-dûm and Angmar as well. We are near enough the halfway point, and the vast majority of this battle has actually already occurred. So the attackers are 1 percentage point behind, but as we've seen so often in the past, the snowball effect tends to favour the attackers in the late game of a siege, particularly when they have the numbers advantage. So I would still give the advantage to the attackers here. They have the quality as well. Angmar and Khazad-dûm have still got a lot of units of good quality. This single unit of pikemen is not going to be enough. They are going to go back to the town centre, I believe. All of those Arthedain forces going to head back to the island, maybe try and shore up that choke point. I don't know exactly what they have left. I'm not sure whether this trebuchet can actually be moved at this point. I think the really annoying artillery glitch of Medieval 2 maybe has happened, where they've sort of slid down a position where they now cannot be sort of rescued from, which would be a real shame for the trebuchet, because that could, again, the sort of thing which could potentially be something which turns the match around. And at this point, really the only thing Steward of Dale can hope to accomplish is whittling down what the defenders have available to them as much as they possibly can, as the Misty Mountains are fairly doomed at this point. Isengard, meanwhile, actually do have a fairly sizable force left alive. They just haven't made any progress yet. And still, this Arthedain defensive force in the gate, unmoving. The trebuchet trying to maybe get what damage it can do in its current position against the Isengard forces that it can hit. Wargs, as the game goes on, actually probably won't be as useful. Like, the time for the cavalry to be useful is now, really, when the defenders are trying to retreat to the town centre. Angmar had the right idea with their Witch Realm Inquisitors charging into the Blacklock Engineers, which they may have killed off in their entirety. There's only some rousing Forlington Marines and Hobbit Slingers over here, so it may be, actually, that the incredibly deadly Blacklock Engineers have been destroyed. I cannot see any of them. There's a lot of dead Blacklocks and crossbows over here. That's a big loss for the defenders. That's probably the most potent tool they had left. Now the Witch Realm Blackguard, so now the defenders heading over here. And still the Witch Realm Inquisitors being used to good effect, charging into those Noldering Guard. They need to be careful. The Noldering Guard will give as good as they get in melee. But any extra damage the Inquisitors can do at this point will be gravy. The fact that they've killed off those Blacklocks in and of itself is worth it, so any additional kills they get is only going to help the evil attackers. Trying to go into the Forlington Marines as well. The Forlington Marines maybe not as good a target, because they are spears, of course, and they aren't maybe as dangerous a threat in melee in the late game. Still, you can see the Witch King there doing his grisly work. The trebuchet is there, but again, I'm not sure the trebuchet can actually move at this point, so I'm not sure how much of a threat that thing actually is. Yeah, I think the attackers have got the advantage here. Initially, I thought the defenders were actually going to run away with this one, but I feel as though leaving Erebor to take on the two more deadly of the four attacking armies may come back to haunt them. Arthedain and Linden going after the low-hanging fruit and not maybe pulling their weight as much as they could have done. Again, they did very well against Isengard and the Misty Mountains, but it's not good enough to just be satisfied with with doing well on one choke point. If you see your ally crumbling in the north, you need to reevaluate what you're going to be doing. Otherwise you will pay the price, and I feel as though that is what's happened here. Because ultimately they haven't been able to finish off Isengard either, so Isengard are going to be able to add their own manpower to this assault. And while Isengard maybe don't have as much in terms of scary units, you know, the Guards of Orthanc really the only higher tier unit they have left, you know, more numbers for the attackers in the late game is always going to be a problem for the defenders if they do not have the tools to kill them off quickly. And in particular something along the lines of, let's say, Trebuchet fight going into the Goblin King Bodyguard there, and the Misty Mountains are even still alive with the Goblin King Bodyguard, and some Snaga. But yeah, if they didn't have something along the lines of this Trebuchet or the Blacklock Engineers, which I don't think they're going to have, because again I believe the Trebuchet is stuck, and I also believe that the Blacklocks were destroyed. You can see here, overconfidence could get the better of the attack, because if Khazad-dûm go in without the support of Angmar and Isengard and the Misty Mountains from this southern bridge, then the defenders will be able to sort of gang up on Khazad-dûm and try and take them out first. But a joint attack here on the town centre, I believe, will only end one way, and that will be victory for the attackers, which I'm sure people will heavily dislike. It's not impossible that the defenders can win this, having said that. The Witchers, however, are still looming large. The Trebuchet crew is here. Not quite sure what Angmar are doing here, engaged in a sort of a staring contest. Here goes the Troll, playing whack-a-mole with that one Trebuchet crewman. The Trebuchet crew now going to be the ones to choose to engage with the forces of Angmar. And Angmar's force is relatively depleted, but a lot of their units are of good quality, which is why I'm rating the attacker's chances so highly. What have we here? More retreating units, perhaps? Routing units, in fact. Goblin King's Bodyguard there, so now Isengard going to be able to get all of their forces within the walls, even as scattered as they still are outside the walls. Snaga skirmishers throwing their payload into this force, although they really don't need to. It's a Trebuchet crew and they're going up against Blackguard. In 0.97, I believe the artillery crews are actually going to be given melee stats similar to sort of archers when they're in melee, whereas at the moment the Trebuchet crew are literally worthless other than just being numbers, meat for the grinder. Meanwhile, Khazad-dûm doing the right thing. They're waiting. And that is a very long name. I'm just going to call him Sher. He is waiting, biding his time, waiting for his allies to start besieging the south bridge. He will then attack the north, and with that force crashing down upon them, I don't fancy the defenders' chances here. I don't think Erebor have actually got anything left, really. They've got some rangers, so body piercing could help. Nolder and Blade Master are a very strong unit, as are the Wardens of the North, but it looks as though they've expended all their ammunition. So again, that's another way in which the defenders have paid the price for doing so well initially against the Misty Mountains and Isengard. They had to use a lot of their ammo for it. Mithlond Marines, who they still have some javelins by the looks of things. Routing Harland and Guard. There's some Nolder and Guard on. Yeah, I can't really see the defenders coming out of this one intact. But perhaps a relatively healthy unit of Arthedain Pikes charging back to their defensive position. And so this, I think we'll actually move up to ×2 speed while this is going on, because now it's just going to be a case of the Orcs getting into position on the south bridge, getting ready to cross it, and then it will be one final grind to the finish. Which round pikemen, Guardians of Khazad-dûm marching into position. I don't know. I mean, the Witcher and Blackguard are still healthy as well. The Wargs won't be helpful. Or maybe they will. There isn't really a huge amount of anti-cavalry there other than the pikes, and they may as well throw them in. I mean, they're not going to see any use in a later stage of the battle. This is going to be the final phase. Isengard now finally sort of getting all of their disparate forces to charge forward into the town centre. Towards the town centre, I should say. Meanwhile, what have we here? Nothing, just routing units. I thought, based on the minimap there, that the defenders were going to try and counter-attack against Khazad-dûm while the lower attackers, while the southern attackers were still trying to get into position, but I think that would have been relatively foolhardy, because you would need a very comprehensive force to take out Khazad-dûm, even as weakened as they are. And that is a lot of Orcs that are going to be charging through the pristine streets of the Grey Havens. An artillery shot? Nope. That's just the marching sound effect. Yeah, I can't see a way out of this for the defenders based on the quality of troops they have left. The attackers have got just too much, I think. And let's have a look at the percentage of kills. I mean, it's dead even in terms of percentages, but I think the overall quality of the attackers, and you can also see there marching with the Guardians of Khandu, we have the Witches. Now, the Witches, I think, still have ammunition, and it's only going to take a single volley to put this well out of reach for the defenders. But obviously, I think the defenders will be aware that the Witches exist, and that will probably be public enemy number one. You can see here, actually, that the Rangers getting a nice volley off, a decent volley into the pikes. I have no idea what the announcer is talking about there, but we'll let him be. Guardians of Khandu shuffling forwards as well. Looks like Angmar are going to be leading the way, which understandable. They still have some stronger elite units, and then be followed in by what remains of the Misty Mountains and Isengard just to sort of cement their position. But I think really Khazad-dûm are going to be the ones in melee which are just going to offer too much for the defenders here. I mean, this is a strong phalanx. The Noldorin Guard providing the anchor for the Arthedain pikemen. One to the north, the Noldorin Blade Masters, all strong units as well. But you know, just the fact that some of the defenders' sort of percentages made up of stuff like Evendim Archers leads me to believe that, yeah, it's not going to end well. Still, let's go up to times 6 speed while the attackers slowly but surely march their way monotonously into position. It's really not worth cutting out this because they're going to lay siege to this area any minute now. Just having a look here. I mean, very often we've seen this on the Grey Havens, where it comes down to a final stand and the defenders haven't got enough left. And I feel as though this is because you have to be careful on the Grey Havens, because... We'll go down to 1 speed now. You have to be careful on the Grey Havens, because as soon as those outer defences are gone, the attackers have got a lot of empty space which they can cause a lot of chaos in, and I feel as though, very often, the area in which the defenders have lost the Grey Havens has been when they've been trying to retreat to the town centre. They've done a reasonable job at holding the outer choke points, and I feel as though that is the case in this one as well. Despite Erebor's losses, if you take the outer engagements in a vacuum, I feel as though the defenders did okay with that, and they can be pleased with how they held up. However, it was in the retreat where a lot of the damage was done. The Witch Realm Inquisitors were able to charge into numerous units and get a lot of kills done on them. In particular, a very decisive loss would have been the Blacklock Engineers. If they had the Blacklock Engineers in this final engagement with some ammunition, it might be a different story, because Khazad-dûm have no choice but to come down and filter into this narrow choke point, and the Blacklocks would be at their strongest in that position. On the other side, they could then obviously use the Rangers to go up against the more lightly armoured Orcs, and then they also have stuff like Noldorin Guard and Noldorin Blade Masters to deal with the Orcs in melee. Could have been different. Could be the difference maker. As is, though, still taking their sweet time getting ready to engage. We actually still have a Dwarven Catapult, which is interesting. I feel as though the defenders have earned the right to have a good old-fashioned scrap in melee rather than be skirmished down, but what do I know? Looks like the Evendim Archers are going to be used as sort of the scapegoat here. They're not going to attack all the way, which is wise, because if they went all the way for the Catapult, the Khazad-dûm Infantry would just kill them off without any sort of kills in return. The Evendim Archers in melee are not going to get much done against the Khazad-dûm Infantry at all. Catapult getting into position, although it will have to shoot through the archways, which a potential little obstacle there. The Orc Hunters fighting against those routing units. The Evendim Archers are going to try and retreat. I think they're still waiting for Isengard to get their forces into position because of how far away their units were outside the city. You can see the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm taking some arrow fire. I think that was from Banderbrass Archers, which honestly, you're better off saving your skirmish ammunition for something which is a little bit more tanky. I mean, this is clearly a gambit from the Dwarven player to try and absorb some of that arrow fire on one of their units, which really isn't that important. You're much better off going after Dwarven elites. Even if they are much more resilient to arrow fire, you're going to need to equalise the fight somehow. Hammers of Gundabad might be a fertile target, considering they do not have a shield value to speak of, nor are they multiple HP. Those Everdom archers are so outclassed in a fight like this. Those Snaga skirmishers are marching forward. I think it's about time that the attackers just moved in and attacked at this point. All this manoeuvring, this painstaking manoeuvring to ultimately end in a melee fight, which I think is going to be fairly one-sided overall. I mean, the Linden units which are left in melee are still pretty decent, but Arthedain, most of it is lower tier stuff, like, you know, Band of Brass archers, Arthedain pikemen, Everdom archers. You know, none of it is exceptional. Really, it's only the Wardens of the North and some very depleted Troll Slayers. The Rangers, of course, are not exactly the last word in quality when it comes to melee either. Now, this was perhaps a little bit foolhardy from Thorn. I mean, Thorn has played the game enough to the point where I think he feels as though this fight is probably over regardless.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
But the Witch Ram Inquisitors now actually taking some fire from the Rangers. The Band of Brass archers in melee, the brave hobbits trying to kill off the Witch King once and for all, who is still alive. Skirmishers moving forward, Uruk-hai archers moving forward. And it's good to see that the defenders are the ones which have decided that they've had enough, and they're going to move to engage the attackers. If the attackers want to move at a snail's pace, then that's their decision. The defenders, however, are not going to stand for this, and they're going to take on some of these smaller units. Obviously, this naturally is risky because the Dwarven Catapult is right here, but the defenders, they earn moral points in my eyes for doing something like this. You know, the battle is already won for the attackers. I think the battle is already won for the attackers, unless there's like Wardens of Elos Tyrion, which have will suddenly show up and offer more body-piercing projectiles. But I feel as though the attackers are being maybe a little bit unsporting here. You know, it's all well and good sort of waiting for your Isengard ally to get into position, but at this point, you know, the defenders have at least earned dying in melee rather than being poked and prodded by Dwarven artillery, I think. And at least the Angmar player agrees, charging headlong into the Noldering Guard, and there is the Witch King, trampling over the smouldering corpses of his foes. Arthedain pikemen and Noldering Guard combining their forces. Uruk-hai archers are reloading, and they also are going to try and skirmish down. That's a little bit disappointing. Like, come on, at least send in a melee engagement as well as trying to skirmish them down. Like, be men about this. Orcans of Khazad-dûm are not going to be enough to defeat Noldering Guard. Javelin fire from the Mithlond Marines and the Dunedain Troll Slayers skirmishing down the Hammers of Gundabad. A little bit of a wave-based assault this. Khazad-dûm clearly not keen on charging in their force until they've used up all of their catapult ammunition. That was a fairly nice hit from the catapult though. Mithlond Marines now committed to melee, reinforcing that line. Barrow Wights shambling forward. Based on the amount of frames left, I would assume that eventually the attackers are going to move in with their melee might. But for the time being, perhaps not. Well, Hammers of Gundabad. The AP will help them against the Noldering Guard, the one genuinely armoured unit in the Linden roster. But ultimately the Elven skill will still give them the advantage in this situation. Again, Khazad-dûm could overwhelm this defence if they sent in all their infantry, but they seem content here to feed kills to the Elves, which is very puzzling. Again, if they had the Blacklock Engineers here in the final defence, with how it's gone so far, I would say that the defenders might have gone on to win this. As it is, though, I don't really think they have the strength to go on to win this. I mean, the Uruk-hai archers still trying to poke and prod at the Noldering Guard, but the armour, the shields, should stand them in pretty good stead. The pikemen just sort of retreating a little bit so they aren't the target of the archers. Arthur Men-at-Arms. Whatever happened to the Wardens of the North? Oh, there they are, back in the town centre. Meanwhile, the Hammers of Gundabad. More reinforcements to this front line. The Band of Brass Archers, obviously not the last word in terms of quality in melee. The green armour of the Hammers of Gundabad not going to be enough to keep them alive in this situation, especially not without the support of their allies. Finally, it looks as though, again, you can see here the classic behaviour of a player that wants to maintain his elite units until the end. Unfortunately, he is now just going to send forward everything, which is, to be honest, what he should have done from the beginning. I mean, the Catapult hasn't really changed the outcome of this fight overly. I still feel as though the attackers would have won with or without that. Here come the 2nd Legion Axe Guard. As well as the elites, this probably will break the back of the defenders. And now finally, enough messing around from the attackers. Good to see we finally have an all-out attack. The Barrow Wights have finally made it to the front line after going very, very slowly. So now it's really just going to be the defenders trying to shore up the line with as much strength as they can muster. Which ultimately will be in vain, but hey, at least they tried, and it is relatively close as well. I mean, I still maintain if they had those black locks with the ammunition, this could have gone differently. Because the black locks are so good at dealing with units in a choke point. They're so powerful if you can get them into the right firing position, which of course the Grey Havens has in these two little grass verges over here. The Dunedain Trollslayer is trying to do some damage. The Catapult crew obviously not going to go too well when they're in melee against Linden forces, but now we can see Mithril Guard, Legion Bodyguard, Sons of the Fallen, all very, very strong units, which will take their time getting through Linden forces, but you see the Noldorin Blade Masters are coming forward, but ultimately I think Khazad-dûm have just got too much left in the tank for Linden to deal with. And even then, they're going to need to send so many resources over to keep this Khazad-dûm force at bay that they're going to leave the door wide open for the Orcs to start pouring forwards. The Witchround Blackguard are on this front line as well, the Wardens of the North. Still some Arthur Men-at-Arms left in reserve as well. The Noldorin Guard being reinforced by the Wardens. Wardens of the North are another really nice looking unit as well. Them and the Dunedain Trollslayers have really got some fashion. Here come the Witchround Inquisitors. Here we can see the Rangers, who are somewhat out of formation, but still able to get some decent hits. Now, this, I feel like, will probably be what breaks the defenders, because there is a gap over here which the Witchround Inquisitors are going to be able to take advantage of. They're going to be able to get into the Dunedain Rangers. There, the Abendim Archers waiting in reserve, possibly going over to try and help reinforce against the Dwarves. Here come the Arthur Men-at-Arms, perhaps to try and save their Rangers. Here come the Abendim. The Dunedain Trollslayers are also in position. Khazad-dûm, it's really only the Noldorin Blade Mass at this point. I mean, they're now being reinforced by Abendim Archers, but that is a token effort at best. Dunedain Trollslayers are still over here, but far too depleted at this point to be of huge assistance. Arthur Men-at-Arms. Oh, the Witch King stuck. Will he fall? Nope, he's going to be able to get away. There are the Dunedain Rangers as well. Uruk-hai Archers moving forward. This front line holding up relatively solidly, but ultimately, you know, Goblin King Bodyguard, Witchround Blackguard. Too many units of high quality in here for just the Wardens of the North and the Noldorin Guard to take on. They do have the Pikes, of course, in support, but they're going to need ranged firepower to help hold them at bay. And while the Dunedain Rangers are just taking consistent charges from the Witchround Inquisitors, which... There is the Witch King. And there are the Dunedain Trollslayers, and it is a bit of a shame, I guess, that the Trollslayers are so depleted, because they're another unit which, if they were in better shape, able to sort of get more solid javelin volleys off into units like this, that could be another thing which would have tipped the balance of this fight. These Arthur Men-at-Arms trying their best to get into melee against the Witchround Inquisitors, but it's not really what they're designed for. The amount of damage they're going to be able to do is relatively limited. Dunedain Rangers going to have to try and get in position to try and shoot into this Orc formation. Actually, defeat seems certain. Well, the Blackguard victory seems certain, so there is a general being killed, which I would assume was the Arthedain general, seeing as the Wardens of the North are right there. Arthedain Men-at-Arms going to try and get over here. That is a fairly nice rear charge from the Witchround Inquisitors into the Abendim Archers, which might be enough to break them. The Noldorin Blade Masters are going to be doing their best on the front line, which 1-to-1 they would probably actually defeat any of the elite Dwarven units which are here, based on the damage taken. And there goes the Elven General, but with the Sons of the Fallen, Legion Bodyguard and Mithril Guard, they would have needed support greater than that the Evendim Archers can offer them, or a depleted unit of Arthedain Men-at-Arms. And yeah, this is going to be the end. A valiant performance from the defenders, though. And again, if they just had a couple of units from Erebor here in the late game, the Black Locks especially, could have been a very different story. But again, this battle is very often won or lost by how effective the defenders can retreat from the outer gates to the town centre. It's very, very rare that you see the defenders actually put up a fight in the city itself. We have seen that before. But more often than not, this is the structure of how this map goes, and very often the defenders are not able to retreat in an orderly enough manner. And it's honestly a good move that the attackers brought so much cavalry. A unit of healthy Dunlending veterans also coming forward. Not a good sight for the defenders. The Dunedain Rangers coming in here, taking a charge from the Witch Realm Inquisitors. The Witch King and his Inquisitors have been very effective today. Probably the single most important unit on the field, with how they hunted down those retreating units and how they've been used in the late game to really hammer home the advantage that the attackers have had. Now the Witch Realm Inquisitor is going to be able to recharge in here. Pikes will be able to turn around and get some decent damage done, but there's the Angmar General right on the front line against the Warden of the North as well. Dunedain Rangers trying to bring down the Witch King once and for all, but he will not fall. Another charge into the Dunedain Rangers. This is coming to the end, really. The final few frames and having a look at the percentages. I mean, it is just about within 10%, which is always the benchmark I use to denote battles that are really close, especially when you get into battles with a lot more armies. You know, 10% is a close fight, and it could have been different. You know, it was the northern defences where Erebor were, where this battle was lost, I think, for the defenders. And for all the reasons I mentioned, the retreat just wasn't orderly enough. I feel as though Linden and Arthedain were just a little bit too content to focus on one gate each while they let Erebor have two. And Erebor needed more support. To be fair, Arthedain did send some skirmishes up there, but it wasn't enough. Like, you can't send a unit of Banderbrass Archers and Dunedain Troll Slayers and expect that to be able to turn back a horde of angry Dwarves of Khazad-dûm and Angmar Orcs. And there you can see the doom of this defence is complete. The Warg Riders pushing through. That is going to be the end. Celebrating there. And so, Angmar getting the most kills of the attackers, which doesn't surprise me too much with how well the Inquisitors did. Linden getting the fewest kills, which Linden in particular seemed very content to just sort of sit on one gate and defend that exclusively, and they did very well against the Misty Mountains, but overall their allies needed more help. You know, Erebor in particular needed more help. I feel as though as well, if Erebor were the ones that are going to take two gates, put them against Isengard and the Misty Mountains, because Angmar and Khazad-dûm are always going to be factions that you look at in this situation and think they're more dangerous. You know, you need to have more on those defensive positions. As for the defenders, Arthedain, getting the most kills, which, yeah, I can see that. You know, they spread themselves out across the battlefield more. You know, they obviously had stuff like javelins, rangers, which will pad their kill counts a little bit. And Erebor, you know, they had all of their armies really on those two outer defences, and they did relatively well initially against Angmar and Khazad-dûm, which they had the two smaller armies, but I still feel as though they were the most deadly, and Erebor should not have been left to their own devices against those two. Meanwhile, the kills, the Witch Realm Blackguard doing okay. What did the Witch Realm Inquisitors get? 275, so yeah, I feel as though certainly they were the MVPs. I feel as though for the attackers in general, the most significant unit was the Witch Realm Inquisitors, not the Witchers actually. They got a decent amount of kills, but you know, they used a volley on that cavalry unit. They essentially killed off that Troll Slayer unit, which did actually turn out to be a fairly important move, but the Witchers weren't the conquerors of worlds that people maybe are used to. Trolls getting a decent amount of kills. The Trolls, when they were committed, were what finally broke the Erebor defence against Angmar, which was important. Angmar, I feel like, were a little bit, you know, too passive very early on, but as soon as the Trolls came forward, they played Angmar as they were intended to be played, very aggressive, just using their might to just sort of crush their way through all the defences. The Barrow Wights doing okay, the Blackwatch Legion doing okay, Guardians of Kharndoom again. Relatively average performance for everything other than the Trolls and the elite units. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed seeing the Grey Havens once again, because I do have 2 of these replays, as I said, in the back burner, so I decided to get through one of them right now, just like the Rivendell battle previous to this one. I'm not really sure what will be next. Again, I can feel, unfortunately I can feel sort of a sense of burnout overcoming me once again with regards to this, sort of trying to keep up the schedule that I do in conjunction with my university schedule. It is pretty hard going, honestly, to sort of keep motivation up, but it is sort of larger scale battles and sort of close affairs like this which do sort of keep me interested. So I'm not sure what will be next. I do have one on Helm's Deep, which I actually recorded before the new year, which I've just been sitting on, which I might release next just so that I can sort of get it off my hard drive, because you know I did have 2 Helm's Deep battles and I decided to use the bigger one for the sort of New Year's event. Whereas I might use this one just for now so that I can finally use it. And then I really hope I will be able to use that Kyrith Ungol fight, because seeing new maps is honestly something which we need to do, because you know I feel myself using the same maps over and over again because they are popular and they often result in good fights like this one. But maps like Kyrith Ungol, and because there are a lot of maps in Third Age Reforged which it seems like never really get used as much as they should, and I would like to see more of those. If you know, obviously Lango has sent me one, but yeah, hopefully I can use more of those, I think, because while these maps are very popular and you know people tend to like using them, you know I feel as though more variety is needed. You know, variety is the spice of life. Just for my own sanity, I need to do some newer maps as well, I think. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which probably will be Helm's Deep, and then following on from that, hopefully I will be able to use the Kyrith Ungol fight once I turn off the particle effects. So yeah, I hope you'll join me for that.